it is honestly ridiculous. There are times where I'm just thinking, like, how have From Software actually pulled this off?
Elden Ring, the latest release from Dark Souls creators From Software, has finally arrived. We here at Rock Paper Shotgun have been traversing the lands between for a week or so now, uncovering secrets, fighting horrible bosses, and pausing at the top of hills to make noises like ooh and oh god no, what the hell is that? Get it away from me, get it away from me. This is My Fave Thing, a series we do here at RPS where I chat to one of my lovely colleagues about their favourite bit from a brand new release. Today I'm joined by Ed Thorn, who's been playing the game for the website and was in the best position to talk to me about this wonderful new release. Enjoy. So Ed, you've been playing a lot of Elden Ring. I have too. What is your favourite thing about Elden Ring?
My favourite thing about Elden Ring is its open world and how it's just endlessly entertaining. I think one of my main concerns, I think for all of us going into Elden Ring, was kind of, would it be barren? Would it be kind of devoid of life? Would it kind of fit that trope of an open world where it's just rammed with lots of pointless things, bloat, I guess? But Elden Ring just isn't. From when I previewed it, I sort of said, like, look, it is constantly engaging, and that's just not changed at all. And I don't know how many hours in now. I'm quite a few hours in. I've been playing for review, and for each time I've played, you're just constantly bumping into, I don't know, catacombs and ruins and optional bosses and cool loot. It is honestly ridiculous. There are times where I'm just thinking, like, how have From Software actually pulled this off? Because it's not... I don't think I've ever really played an open world game where almost every optional thing or little path you find leads to something interesting. I sort of love the way that almost all of it as well, if all of it, ties like into the lore of the world in some like interesting way. I have to admit that I don't really know what's going on in the story, which is often what happens with a Souls game. I just watch like a 2-hour lore like deep dive once I've finished it or something.
I can't wait to find out how the big glowing tree is so important. Because, I don't understand what's going on either.
Yeah, I'm just like, the NPCs are chatting about, like, shatterings and the ring or whatever. I'm just like, yeah, cool, guys. Yeah, like, I'll just go get that long sword from that cave back there. It's all good. But, I think just an example, I guess, of how they've added something that kind of ties into kind of the world and the lore quite nicely. I like those, I guess, kind of like processions. Like, you've got these two big giants. We saw them in the trailers way back when, but kind of two giants that kind of carry this, I don't know, a coffin, I suppose, in the back of like a chariot, and they're all kind of being followed by a bunch of, I don't know, villagers or whatever with flaming torches and things. And I guess break it down to its like simplest components, it is just some loot in the back of a coffin. But the way they kind of like implement that, it just adds like so much kind of character to the world, and you kind of see these two massive giants and this loot being carried in the back of a thing, and you don't encounter them that often, and it's sort of like a miniature puzzle or battle, whatever way you want to approach it, when you're just riding around in the open world. It's just something to do. There's always something there, and they'll just cross your path at times where you think you've had a little bit of downtime. And there's often not a lot of downtime, I find. I don't think I go more than, say, 2 or 3 minutes before I'm just going into some cave. And then it kind of switches from Elden Ring roaming around the open world to more of like a classic Souls, I would say.
I'd absolutely agree with that. Like a self-contained area that feels more like something from earlier entries.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly what I was thinking. Like, you can almost start butting your head against one thing. You've sort of got to commit to that thing. But I like the way that in previous Souls games, they're not always linear, but they are more linear. You would have to bump your head against an obstacle to kind of, get through it. And sometimes it can be really frustrating. The only thing you can do is put down the controller and come back another day. Whereas in Elden Ring, I find because it's an open world and because you have so much to do, if you're struggling with this one particular cave or something and its boss, you can sort of reel yourself back and go, okay, I can't do this today. I'm just going to go back out of this cave now, and I'm just going to go find something else to do, because there's just so many options, and I think it's probably the most encouraging Souls game out there.
Yes.
Souls games aren't known for being sort of helpful. I suppose in many ways this game isn't helpful, but I think just the way the open world is like constructed, it just gives you, the player, just so much choice, and it kind of wants to push you in different directions, and it sort of just lets you crack on with things.
What I would say, something I've been thinking about a lot while playing it, because I absolutely love this game, and I've never ever gotten a From Software game like this before. It's never hooked me the way Elden Ring has. And I think it's because, considering how dense the open world is, and you're completely right, I've never played a game that is as vast and as dense as this one, full of interesting things that the game does not highlight. It does not mark your map. It expects you to find it, remember it, and that's it. If you don't, there's so much you could miss in this game. It's terrifying to think of the things we were talking before we started recording. Things that we've missed in the opening hour of the game that I just wandered past without realizing it was there. But this game gives the player space, which, you're right, earlier From games never did. They were always so constrained, and they were looping tiny corridors that you got trapped in and stuck in, and there was horrible nasties. And that still is in this game 100%. If you liked that aspect of earlier games, there's an embarrassment of that stuff to be found.
Yeah.
But that space to go off and almost learn what's going on and how to tackle its problems in your own time, that's what I've really appreciated. There's a very small camp. This isn't a spoiler. I'm going to try and keep spoilers to a minimum, but there's a very small, like a military camp at the start of the game. Yeah. And there's a couple of soldiers, a couple of wolves, and a guy with a spear and a shield who's really quite difficult to kill. And you can tackle that in any way you want. You can sneak in, you can go in all swords blazing. It's not a phrase. But that gave me the opportunity to really work out the finer details of the combat. I went away and I just defeated some of the roaming bands of enemies that you mentioned. I leveled up a little bit in a cave. It just gave me the opportunity to engage with the game at my level, which I think normally From Software games don't do. So it's not any less challenging at all. I would say that Miyazaki saying that it was an easier game is incorrect. It is just a game that encourages you to stick with it in a way that is better for you.
Yeah, 100%. The challenges that it sets out are difficult, but because there are just, as you say, there are so many like sort of I guess micro challenges that kind of teach you the ropes or sort of let you maybe get a bit stronger. So you can come back to those maybe bigger challenges, the more sort of story focused ones, and you'll come back just stronger and wiser, rather than in previous Souls games where you're kind of you are just stuck with your tools at that given time, and your only option is to run through that fog door a trillion times until you beat them. So yeah, I totally agree. I think Elden Ring just gives you so many different tools, and it sort of trusts you to kind of figure it out. We were talking about it as well before, where whenever I'm given an open world map, I rarely kind of mark it. Whereas in this, I'm just constantly using map markers to, remind myself and tell myself, like, there's some soldiers around this chest and I'm struggling to crack it open, basically. So I'm just going to mark that down. I can come back to that later. And there might be a boss that I've discovered, and again, I now know that it's fine. The game will let me come back to that later. Like, it's not some obstacle that I just have to crack now. And actually, that sort of brings me on to another thing. Elden Ring actually, again, it's not spoilers. I would just say that there are times in the game where Elden Ring will shift you to a certain position on the map, and it will come as a surprise. Mm-hmm. It's almost the game just saying, hey, look, you were in this particular spot now. All of a sudden, I'm going to shift you here. And you can just shift back if you want. But it was quite interesting that it gave you the option to approach the game from a totally different angle. Yeah. I'm honestly trying to keep it vague, and it might sound a bit confusing, but if you play it and you encounter that, it's just cool. Like, you don't have to approach things in a certain way. You can tackle it from so many different angles, even just terrain wise is what I'm trying to get at, but I won't say any more because otherwise we'll probably upset some people.
One thing I think I was quite surprised by is, considering how desolate and ruined the world is, it is so beautiful, and it also feels really alive. There's a lot of dynamic events occurring. There's a lot of little animals running around, loads of turtles so many
so
turtles in
many
this game.
turtles, yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? There's so many. But it really does feel like people are surviving here. They're definitely not living, but they're surviving. And I think again, it's probably one of the first From Software titles where you get a sense of how this world functions right down to almost like a community level. It really does feel like there are small pockets of quote unquote people or creatures, and they're just desperately trying to get by in this absolutely miserable, horrible place. But there is something to that. It is such a cohesive vision. And there's quite a few instances where I just stopped on a hill and just watched a group of enemies fighting each other, having a wander around, a pack of wolves just walking through a forest. It really does feel alive and kinetic almost in just how much movement and life there is in this world.
Yeah, 100% actually. Until you mentioned that, I hadn't really thought about it that much, and that's maybe just because it sort of envelops you. It might sound a bit cliche to say, but because you're in that world, it's doing all these things, you almost don't notice it, and that's a good thing, because you are just, once you boot that game up and you're in Elden Ring, it does just feel you're in a totally different place. Like, that's all you can think about. It's so atmospheric. Like you were saying, there's just so many turtles everywhere. I love it. I love the turtles. There's like little rabbits that are hopping around, like goats, all sorts of wildlife, and even just like the way the grass like sways, and you can get the day-night cycle progresses, and you can get rain and it gets dark, and I think there are moments where you've got that great big golden tree, and it's really like beautiful. You can kind of get the golden leaves kind of like blowing across your screen, and you can go from somewhere that's quite green and grey and kind of ruinous to somewhere that's more desolate and sort of scarred and red and horrible. There are just all sorts of different environments, and I think some of them clearly inspired by previous Souls games, but they are just like stunning to the point where I'm almost kind of in disbelief at how much and how dense, like you said, this game is. It almost feels kind of impossibly rich. I don't know how they've done it.
I have no idea how they've done this in the time between this and Sekiro.
For sure.
Because it has not been that long. And either they've been working on this since Dark Souls 3, and this has been their, passion project, and that implies that Sekiro was a side project, which
ridiculous.
I've never been as excited about a game in years, is what I'll say about Elden Ring. I don't know if you agree, but
yeah, 100%.
I feel like you mentioned in your preview that this was going to be a really good pub game, that you could just go to the pub and just talk endlessly about little stories and things you found.
Yeah.
Multiple pub trips could be spent talking about Limgrave alone, I think. Just the stuff. How have they done this, Ed? How have they done that?
I honestly don't know. I think that's again, like sort of multiple pub trips. I think that's one thing with Elden Ring where it's like, I think in previous Souls games, what I'm trying to say is that in previous Souls games, most people's adventures are going to kind of line up. They're all going to largely be the same. Like, you'll do one big boss and then you'll all move on to the next one and so on. So those pub trips are kind of, when did you reach this boss? I reached him 5 hours in or something. Cool.
Yeah.
In Elden Ring, you can really sort of, it sounds again very cliche and very markety, but you can carve your own adventure with this. You really can. Like,
you really can.
You could all be sat around a table and you all could have played 5 hours, and one of you might have reached a main story boss, another could literally have just been butting their head in a cavern somewhere, and someone else may have just been in a totally different area entirely. So I just think the way they've kind of designed this open world is, I just think this is the most encouraging Souls game out there. There's just so much to talk about and so much to see and so much to do. It's going to be on people's lips for certainly this year, but could be years. It's sort of knowing what people discover, all these secrets and these things you can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so much I've missed. I know I have, because I've put markers down and I haven't got to them yet.
They give you 100 markers, and I'm at the point now, still in Limgrave after 15 hours. I'm worried I'm going to run out.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for watching. For more Elden Ring goodies, make sure to have a look over at Rock, Paper, Shotgun. Otherwise, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.